All right, let's jump into a quick video talking about valves. I've got two valves here, two common valves. They're both 1-inch valves. And what we want to do is talk about the components that are in these valves and how to get replacement parts for the valve and how to put the replacement parts in. We'll save how the valves work for another video. But the valve I've got here in my left hand, this is known as a jar top valve. I happen to pick this one out of our warehouse. It's the Toro Easy Flow model. And really what we want you to know is that if you have a stuck valve or a leaking valve and you need to replace the diaphragm that's inside here, we recommend that you buy a new valve, an entire new valve. And that would apply for a jar top valve or a screw top valve. The reason being is that when you need to replace just one of the parts, the price for that replacement part is half to almost the same price as the full valve. So there's benefits in buying the entire valve complete because you get the replacement diaphragm in this case, and you'd also get a new replacement solenoid, and you have all the parts and pieces that you need, and you can just swap out the replacement parts. So let's go ahead and we're going to take this valve apart by unscrewing the jar portion of the valve. And then you can pop this open. And inside there's going to be a couple pieces. Every valve is going to have a spring. This is what closes the valve, helps put pressure on the valve when the water's turned off to close it. And then you have the diaphragm portion. They can sometimes be tricky to pull out. Okay, so when you buy a replacement diaphragm, this is the component that you're buying. And if you know how to fix a valve and you're not worried about any of the other parts failing and you know specifically this is what you need, then yes, go ahead and buy the replacement diaphragm and you can replace it. A couple things you want to be careful of when you take your valve apart is that you don't lose any of the pieces like this spring. We don't sell these springs separately, so if you needed a new spring, you would buy an entirely new valve. And then there's also this sort of set collar that's inside the valve. You don't want to lose this either. And when you take your valve apart and you want to look for debris and make sure all of this is clean, then you can take your replacement diaphragm and put the parts back together, making sure not to drop any of them in the mud and in the dirt. And if you do, clean them off, of course. And then you can put your valve back together like that. So the diaphragms are a common failure point. Dirt tends to get stuck in there sometimes. Your valve might just need a cleaning. It may not need a new valve. And then you also have the solenoid portion. These solenoids unscrew. And what I'm going to do is unscrew both solenoids. So this is the solenoid from the Toro valve. And then we have another solenoid here from the Hunter valve. And you want to make sure that you buy a solenoid that's meant for your valve. So in other words, you can't use this Hunter solenoid and put it onto the Toro valve because the threads just don't fit. And you can't take the Toro solenoid and put it on the Hunter valve or mix a Weathermatic solenoid with a Rainbird valve and a Rainbird valve solenoid with a Hunter solenoid. So every manufacturer's solenoid is unique to their particular model valve. Again, if you need a replacement solenoid, I would suggest that you buy a new valve as long as it's one of these inexpensive 1-inch valves. If you have an 1.5 inch, a 2-inch, or a 3-inch valves, those valves can get much more expensive. They can be in the $30 to $100 range, and at that point, it will be less expensive just to buy the solenoid. But if you have a standard residential valve that's a 1-inch, we'd recommend just buying the complete valve. And then you have, like I said, you've got your solenoid, you've got your replacement diaphragm, you've got your replacement cap. You can essentially convert all of the inner pieces of the valve while keeping the main body of the valve in place. So this is the portion that will stay in the ground, and you can replace all the components of this valve by using spare parts from a new valve. And you can keep the other parts, around your house and Just like anything else, when one thing fails, there's probably going to be another one. So as soon as you replace your diaphragm, next thing you know, your solenoid's going to fail. So you might as well keep a couple full valves handy. So again, our recommendation would be that if you need a replacement solenoid and you're working with a 1-inch valve, you might as well buy the whole valve, and then you get all the parts and pieces that you're going to need. And hope that helps. And if we can help you with any of your other sprinkler needs, please give us a call, hit us up on chat, or send us an email. And until then, happy sprinkling.